Hey guys, this is Arknights and today I wanted to do something a little different from the videos that I've been uploading on my small YouTube channel. So those of you that have been watching my channel know that I've been uploading pretty much pure gameplay videos up until now, and it's just been me, on X map, clearing the map with whichever operators I feel like using on that particular day. What I wanted to do today was I wanted to do something that would help my audience kind of with Contingency Contract, because CC6 Wild Scales is the event that's going on right now, and I thought that I had an area of expertise and I wanted to share some of my knowledge with regard to that here. So what I did was I put together a list of 5 things, and these 5 things relate to the purpose of this video, which is to help people push risk a little bit more on their own. It's especially geared toward people who are at risk 18 right now and want to push up to risk 19 or 20, or are right below 18, like at 15 or 16, something like that, and they feel like they're stuck, they don't know how to move on. What can I do to move forward? What risks should I choose or should I take to help me move up and hopefully get to that magic 18 number? So for a little bit of background before we get into the list, as you can see in the bottom left here, like I've reached contingency level 18 on this CC6 Wild Scales during the first week, so I've gotten the trend medal and all that good stuff. And I've been playing CC since its inception in Arknights, and every time I've cleared risk 18, with my highest risk so far being risk 27 on CC4 Lead Seal, and generally the highest that I've been able to reach on these CCs is around the 26-27 range. But when I do these CC events, like, I don't prepare for them ahead of time. So I don't have any operators or skills or masteries that I've worked on specifically for CC. I haven't watched any videos or guides. I haven't gotten any help from my friends, things like that. I've just waited for the content to drop, and when it drops, I've taken a look at the map and, just tried to figure things out and puzzle through it and kind of play it by ear and try to learn by experience as I go through and see how far I can go and just try to challenge myself and see how far I can get. That's just the way that I enjoy playing Arknights. Obviously, you're free to enjoy playing Arknights whichever way that you feel is best for you. But no matter how you play, if you want to improve your scores and challenge yourself a little bit, I hope that what I tell you in this video will help you achieve those endeavors. So getting into the list, let's start with number 1. And the way this list is going to work is the most important things are things that I'm going to talk about first, and then we'll talk about things that are less important later on. But all the things on this list should help you out in terms of improving your risk if you're trying to push. So the first thing is, one thing you want to do when you look at this huge wave of risks here and you want to know what to take, is you want to avoid trap risks if at all possible. And what exactly are trap risks? Well, what I'm defining as a trap risk is a risk that has a disproportionate positive value for you compared to how much of a negative impact it's going to have on your operator's performance. So for example, if we look at something like this, which is HP erosion minus 15% HP, I don't consider this to be a trap risk. I consider this to be a good risk because most of the time your units can handle a 15% HP decrease. Like, it's not a very significant difference on its own on a map. But when you look at other risks, like for example this risk 3 HP up, 110% max HP, like that is a massive difference. And it often comes into play that if you take something like this, like the enemies start to swarm on you if you have a weaker team, especially one that can barely reach 18, and it's going to be very difficult for you to take them out, especially if there are elite enemies or boss enemies there, because their HP goes up by more than 100%. So it's more than doubling HP, and bosses and elite enemies tend to have high HP or high stats in general anyway, so it can be problematic for you. So HP risk 3 is generally considered to be a trap risk, even for high risk players. This is usually one of the last risks you take if you're a very high risk player going for max risk. That's what you want to do. Other trap risks are just general risks that help enemies. So like, for example, if you take enemy attack up 2, all enemies gain 40% attack. The contingency level 1 risk is probably fine, but you're probably going to want to avoid taking contingency level 2 if you can. I mean, if you're forced to take it, then you have to, but if at all possible, it's better to avoid the enemy attack up 2 and HP up 3 if you can. And then the last set of trap risks that I want to go over is usually on the far right side. You'll have a bunch of risks here that are all worth 1 contingency level each, and they're not necessarily trap risks, but you want to be really wary of them when you're taking a look at them. So first of all, let's look at the HP seal risk. So this one, for example, might be a trap risk. It really depends on the CC, but in CC6 wild skills in particular, you might want to avoid taking this because there are 2 really big threats on the map, which are the Tiakaw Braves, these crocodile warriors with big shields, and Red Mark Infiltrators. Now, the Infiltrators aren't so much of a threat as they are someone that can just go through your entire team and get to the blue box and get through and ruin your day if you have the HP Seal 1 risk taken, because when they have their holographic mirages out, they can't be blocked, and they have a really high physical and arts dodge rate, so it can be difficult to take them out reliably over the course of several tries if you're trying many runs to push out a map. So that's what you should keep in mind, is this one. And then the movement speed risk usually is in the same tier as HP Seal 3 as one of the risks that you want to avoid, especially if you're below risk 18, because sometimes these movement speed risks can make or break a run on their own, and all you're getting is contingency level 1, so the value just isn't there. And then lastly, we've got defense 200 for the enemies. Now, if you're using a caster-based team, then obviously this is essentially a free risk for you. Casters or arts damage or whatever, because you're not going to have to worry about the 200 defense. But if you're using a physical team, then you might want to avoid taking this if possible. And let's go a little bit more in depth on this, because it's not clear just from looking at it that 200 defense is significant, because it doesn't really seem like that much, right? It's only 200 defense. Like, what does that matter? But if we actually go in here and compare the 200 defense to the actual attack stat of an operator we have, so let's say, for example, Helger, his attack stat is 788, and this is an E260 Helger, and he has 200% trust. So the only attack he's missing is 30 levels of attack from 60 to 90, and the 26 attack from his potential bonus. But putting all that aside, we can just compare the 200 to his attack stat of 788. So when he doesn't have any skills up, 200 is 1/4 of 800. So it's going to be reducing his damage by more than 25%, because his attack stat is lower than 800, which means it's more than 25%. And if you compare that, for example, to the friendly unit attack down risk, which is minus 20% attack, like, you can see that, not accounting for skills, the def up risk for enemies is actually worse to take than it is to take the friendly unit minus 20% attack risk. Now, if you take skills into account, it's a little bit different, because if you look at somebody like Silver Ash using his S3 and Mastery 3, attack plus 200%, then his attack stat is going to go up to about 2400, and 200 is only 1/14 of 28 of 20. Well, that's 1/14 of 2800, so I should say it's going to go up to 2400. So 200 is going to be 1/12 of that. So that's not really nearly as big of a difference as would be when Silver Ash's skills are not up, but the important thing to note is that you don't always have skills up, and in Silver Ash's case, S3 has a really long cooldown, so most of the time he's just going to be attacking normally, so you're going to be losing over 25% of your damage there. So to summarize what I feel are the major trap risks here, it's going to be movement speed with the Sandstorm, defense 200 if using a physical team, HP seal 1, possibly attack up 2, and HP seal 3. And another one to note is just high contingency level risks in general, like the risk 3 for Teokar Braves and the risk 3 for HP down, because those risks can be really rough. And honestly, if you're just going for 18 or a little bit over 18, they might be completely unnecessary, because you can just get away with not having any risks at 3 or higher, because often they involve significant debuffs to your team, like HP minus half, or significant buffs to the enemies. So that's what you want to pay attention to. Okay, so moving on from that, the next thing you want to do on the list is number 2, identify and minimize key threats. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put up every single risk that I took when I was trying to reach risk 18 on this map. And when you look at these, you're going to see that for my 18, I didn't take any of the Teokar Brave risks. And why did I not do that? Because for my particular strategy, the choke point for me that was causing me to lose runs was the Teokar Braves taking out my units. So I identified them as a threat and minimized the threat as much as possible while putting my risks into different things, and that was able to help me clear risk 18. Now, one thing you want to note is that I mentioned not to take some of the trap risks, but you can see I have a couple trap risks here. Like I have HP down 3, and I have all of the miscellaneous risks on the right side taken. You might be wondering, like, why did I do that despite my advice? Well, the thing is, for week 1 risk 18, often you have no choice but to take some trap risks. So what you have to do is you have to just take the smallest amount of trap risks as possible to succeed with a clear. During week 2, it's often more forgiving, and you can sometimes take absolutely no trap risks to get to 18. But if you want to get that trimmed metal, you're going to have to really challenge yourself a little bit here. And of course, it doesn't have to be the Teokar Brave that's the threat. If in your case it's the Teokar Fanatics or the Teokar Ritualists that are giving you trouble, you can get rid of those, and then you can see I'm at 16, so maybe I'll take, I don't know, Teokar Brave 2 on the left branch there, and then I just have to worry about them, and I don't have to worry nearly as much about the Fanatics or the Ritualists. So that's just some basic strategy for identifying and minimizing key threats. So now, number 3, when you're choosing risks, you want to choose risks based on their value. And I talked about this a little bit in the first one, when I talked about the defense up risk. But as far as value goes, we have to go a little bit more in depth when we talk about some of these risks here. So let's start with the HP erosion risk, and you'll see what I'm talking about after I explain it. So if you look at each risk individually and see how much value you're getting from that risk, you'll notice that sometimes there's a pattern, but often there isn't a pattern because risks are not created equal in Arknights. So you'll usually have like the Contingency 1 level risks. These risks are often going to be better value than Contingency level 2 and Contingency level 3. Sometimes they're the same, but often they're not. And the higher Contingency level that you take, the worse the risks get. So for example, if you take HP down 1, or the HP erosion risk, you have all friendly units have minus 15% HP. Then you compare this one to erosion 2, we just discussed 1, and you've got minus 30%. And then you look at erosion 3, and you have all friendly units have minus 50% max HP. So what you'll note here is that when you go from no risk at all to 1, 15% decrease. Then you go from 1 to 2, and you have a 30% decrease. So subtract 15 from 30, and you get 15%. So the value of these two risks here is exactly the same. Then you move on to risk 3 and you have 50%. So you've got 15, 15, 20 because 50 minus 30 is 20. So the worst value out of the 3 is the HP erosion 3. So if I were to recommend a risk out of the 3 that you should pick as a starting point, I would recommend HP erosion 2 because it has the same value as 1 in terms of how much it hinders your team, but it doesn't have as bad of a detrimental effect as HP erosion 3 does. So start with 2, and then if that's difficult for you, go down to 1 or don't take it or whatever, but I recommend taking HP erosion 2 if you want to take that risk. Now let's look at a slightly more complex example. Let's look at the Teocall Brave risks over here. So if you look at Teocall Brave Contingency Level 1, all Teocall Braves have plus 40% HP, plus 15% attack, and plus 20 res. So we want to analyze each of these 3 things individually. So let's start with HP. We've got 40% here, and there's a left branch and a right branch. So let's start with the left branch first. We go from 40% to 60%. So 60 minus 40 is 20. And then for Contingency 3, we have 90. So 90 minus 60 is 30. So you'll note, if all of them had the same value, it would have gone from 40 to 80 to 120, but that didn't happen. Instead, we got 40, and then 60, and then 90. So in other words, we have 40, 20, 30. So in this case, even Contingency Level 3 has better value than Contingency Level 1, while the best value comes from Contingency Level 2. So that's what you need to pay attention to here. Now if we look at the right branch, we start at 1 again, so we start at 40, then we go to 80, so it has the same value in terms of HP, and then we go to 130, so that adds up to 50% HP differential between 2 and 3. So that means that Contingency Level 3 on the right branch actually has the worst value out of all of them. So right now, just based on HP, the recommended risk is going to be Contingency Level 2 on the left branch because it has the lowest HP differential between 1, 2, and 3. So now we need to look at the rest of the aspects to make sure that that's true. So let's go to res next to get that out of the way because I already know. If you look at 1, it's 20 res. Both of these are 40 res. And then both at Contingency Level 3 is 60 res. So the value of all these is the same, so we can just ignore it. Let's move on to the next part, which is going to be the attack stat. So at 1, we've got 15%. At 2, we've got 30, so the differential is 15. And then the right branch has got 30% attack again, so the differential is 15. Then you go to Contingency Level 3, and you've got 50% on the left branch, and on the right branch you've got 50% again. So it follows the exact same pattern that the HP erosion risk did. You got 15, 15, and 20. So what does that mean? It means that you're going to want to stick to level 2 risks again to get the best value. In this case, it could be for the left branch or the right branch because the right branch also only has 30% attack. So now we've identified that so far the best benefit comes from Teocall Brave 2 in the left branch. But you also have to take into account the extraneous variables that might be added. So if you look at 1, it has nothing extraneous, but looking at Contingency Level 2, the elites also get plus 75 attack speed. Then you go to Contingency Level 3, and the elites get another 75 attack speed for 150, and they become invisible. So this has an additional negative effect. Now if you look at the right branch, you'll see that they only have 40% reduced def when blocked. And that's the extra thing that was added on. And then you look at Contingency Level 3 and they no longer have reduced def when blocked. So you'll note that here, Level 2 on the right branch has the worst value because you go from 100% reduced def when blocked to 40%, so you lose 60% of the advantage. And then for 3, they have no longer any def reduction, so you lose the 40% that was left. So 2 has bad value, whereas on the left side here, the attack speed difference is the same. regardless of what risk you take here. All of them have the, well, not all of them, 2 and 3 have the same value in terms of that, except 3 has the extra one. So the summary that we can make here is the one that has the most benefits for you while having the least negative effects is going to be contingency level 2 for the Tia Caubrates on the leftmost branch. That's the one I would recommend. So I would recommend taking this, and then if you have to take another one, you can take HP Erosion 2. So these are good starting points for you for these two things. Then you can just extrapolate that and use that for the rest of these risks here that are all in the same category. So that does it for number 3. Moving on to number 4, when you're picking risks, you want to choose risks that synergize with your team. So for example, if you're using like some kind of stall strategy where your goal is to stall the enemies out and slowly whittle them down, then you're probably not going to mind taking the attack down risk. Because if you can set up a successful stall strategy, it doesn't really matter how high your attack is. So you can use that. On the other hand, if you're using like some kind of offensive glass cannon strategy, or your units are very unlikely to be taking any hits because you're dealing the damage first, then you're not going to mind taking attack up 1 or even attack up 2, because enemies attacking your units isn't going to matter if they're barely getting hit or not getting hit at all. So it's essentially a free risk in that case. So those are just two small examples of things that you want to take. And obviously, like I mentioned earlier, like if you have a caster team, it's a free risk for you to take the defense up risk because it literally doesn't affect your damage at all. And if you don't plan to do any leaks, then you'll want to take HP Seal 1 because that's a free risk. So those are just the things that you want to keep in mind. And then as for number 5, this is the last one on the list. You'll want to remember that even if you take certain specific risks, they might not lock you into a strat. Now this applies particularly for people around risk 18 level. If you're going for high risk, like let's say you're maxing all this stuff out and you're going for risk 26 on the map, then you're probably going to be locked into 1 or 2 or 3 specific strategies and you're not going to be able to deviate from them because the difficulty level is so high. But if you're just going for what we're doing, like around the 18 level, you have a bit more wiggle room with the risks that you take. So for example, if you're taking the class ban risks, like this one for example, casters and supporters, their DP cost is tripled and the redeployment time is increased by 50%. It seems pretty bad, but you have to keep in mind that it doesn't completely lock you out of the class. Like in Arknights in the past, they used to do hard class bans, but now they just do soft bans where you can still use the class, but it has a huge DP cost to do so, and if you retreat them, it's very difficult to get them back onto the map. But there are some nuances to that too, because in particular for the supporter caster risk, supporters, especially aura supporters like Sora or Scotty the Corrupting Heart, have low DP costs anyway. So it actually doesn't really matter if you take the supporter and caster soft ban. You might still be able to use Scotty and Sora on the map, because look, Scotty the Corrupting Heart only has a cost of 8 at base potential 1. So if you multiply that by 3, it goes up to 24, but even 24 is less than someone like Helliger or Chen the Hollanday. Both of them, even without having any soft class ban at all, their default DP sitting at 25 at potential 1 and 32 or potential 2 and 32 at potential 1 is already higher than Scotty's even when it's tripled. So you're not completely locked into strategies like that. So I don't want you to feel like you have to stick exactly to what the risks state. Feel free to branch out and explore and experience things on your own. There's a lot of strategies that you can use to succeed. So as a quick recap, let's go through the 5 things. So number 1, when you're choosing risks, avoid trap risks. 2, identify and minimize key threats on the map. 3, choose risks based on their value. 4, choose risks that synergize with your team. And 5, keep in mind that taking certain risks might not lock you into a specific strategy. So those are the 5 things on the list. I hope that by listening to this video, it's going to help you make better choices and help you improve your scores in Contingency Contract for CC6 Wild Scales and any other ones that come up in the future. So thank you for watching, and good luck.